All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We have actually I think almost 130 people who have registered for today, and we'll see who joins us live. And of course, we'll be recording this so yourselves and your colleagues and those who registered can view it after as well. So I'm Erin Hancock. I'm pleased to be able to welcome you here today to one of our special topics webinar series through the International Center for Cooperative Management in the Sobey School of Business at St. Mary's University. I'm the program manager for education with the center, and I also serve on the boards of my local credit union as well as the theater cooperative here in Halifax. Our center is located in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, East Coast, on the Atlantic Ocean, in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional unceded and never surrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people. If you'd like to say hello in the chat and acknowledge what lands you're on today, please do so, acknowledging that cooperatives are very place-based in their development and engagement. It's important to think about the history of the lands where we reside and work and do our cooperative cooperation as well. I want to acknowledge that with our partners around the world, our center offers business education online to elevate the cooperative economy. We do research on co-op governance and management. We do symposia, webinars, study tours, and working papers and other activities to put ideas and tools in the hands of people who do good work in cooperatives globally, like yourselves. More on all of that can be found at managementstudies.coop. And we also do in-person and online executive education and short courses as well for people that can't necessarily engage in a full online 3-year part-time master's program. So the webinar will explore today the latest research published under the International Cooperative Alliance EU Partnership for International Cooperative Development. The report entitled Cooperation for a Transition to a Green Economy provides a collection of case studies from co-ops around the world who are facing our climate crisis head on and taking action to be part of the solution. We are lucky to have 3 of the researchers from this report from 3 different regions with us today. So I'll tell you a little bit about our speakers, and thanks. I see some people are adding their hellos to the chat. Please do so. Introduce yourselves. This is, we set this up as a Zoom meeting as opposed to a Zoom webinar so people can communicate with each other, see who else is here. This is certainly a gathering place. So about our speakers, Jeffrey Moxom is a research coordinator at the ICA under the ICA-EU Partnership for International Development. He currently works on a number of research initiatives on international and cooperative development, including cooperative statistics, cooperative law, and sustainable development. He studied politics at the University of Leicester. I knew I could get it the second time. And environment, development, and policy at the University of Sussex. Ms. Simren Singh works as a program officer at the International Cooperative Alliance Asia and Pacific Office in New Delhi, India. She has worked under the ICA-EU Partnership on Cooperatives for Development from 2016 to 2021 and was involved in a number of research studies in the Asia and Pacific region within the ICA-EU Partnership. Simran holds a master's in politics, international relations from Jawaharlal Nehru University in India, and a bachelor's in economics and political science from Lady Shri Ram College for Women, the University of Delhi, India. We also have Melvin Khabenje, who holds a master's in international relations with a focus in development studies and a Bachelor of Science in economics. He's currently in charge of the research projects under the ICA-EU Partnership within the ICA Africa Regional Office in Nairobi, but is joining us today from Freetown. So I invite you to continue having a conversation in the chat, adding your comments throughout, adding your questions. We'll have time at the end of the webinar for folks to be able to also, speak their voice into the conversation, give examples themselves, challenge some of the ideas that came up today as well. Certainly we acknowledge that the climate crisis is something that's very top of mind for so many of us, as it is something that we're all facing globally in different ways and at different times, but certainly it's something that is present in and should be present in how we're planning and thinking about our cooperatives and our cooperative economy. So before I turn it over to the speakers, I am going to run a poll. I see as as it often happens, someone has logged in from the ICCM account, and so I no longer have the ability to share a poll, but I bet that person, maybe Hanan, maybe Sonia, can now hit for poll 1 to launch that. This is a team approach. So if Hanan or Sonia, if you're logged into the ICCM account, if you can launch poll 1, please do so now. Okay, launched, great. So you should see a poll with 2 questions in front of you there. And take a moment to look at those options. And give your responses. And Hanan, if you want to unmute yourself, and now you're participating. And if you want to let us know when most of the responses have come in, and go ahead and share the results of those and let us know where it landed, that would be great.
I have 4 stragglers who have yet to participate, which might be Yumi, Sonia, and Karen. So 61% of you have answered, yes, we are seeing some noticeable effects of climate change. 39% say, yes, a lot has changed. No one has said no, and no one hasn't thought about it. And then, do you see the co-op model as a natural fit to adapt to climate change? 35%, yes, clear fit. Possibility is there, 46%. It depends, 17%. And a minority of 4% is no.
Thank you, Hanan. Thank you. It's great to have your voice in here today. We'll have another poll at the end of the speakers as well. So thanks everyone for participating in that. I think it's clear that this is something where we feel like we have a role in terms of thinking about this and making this top of mind, but also interesting to see those results for the second question. Certainly seems like many of us see co-ops as being a fit and or possessing the possibility to make a contribution or to be part of the solution perhaps. And interesting, I think it's fair to say it depends on who the leadership is. We see a real variety in terms of how the cooperative model is expressed, depending on those involved and the vision, and certainly the education background and sort of the motivations that drive the people involved as well. So I think that's a fair spread in terms of your responses. So with no further ado, I will turn it over to our speakers to get started today. For any of the participants, you can go ahead and turn off your video currently, just so we showcase the presenters, but feel free to keep in the chat conversing and adding in your comments. I'll be noting any questions to the presenters so we can address them toward the end of the session. And we will have time for you all to get your voices in and unmute and show your videos again toward the end as well. So over to you, Jeffrey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin. Really big thanks for having us. It's really a pleasure to be here to speak today about the research report. And already with the results of the polls, I think we'll have a really, really exciting discussion. And so we just want to give you a bit of info on this report, which you can see on the screen in front of you. It came out last month on the 23rd of September. So I'll just give a brief introduction, a little bit of an overview of what we did, some ideas that have come out, and then pass over to my colleagues, Melvin and Simren, who will give a bit of an overview of some of the case studies that were featured. Some brief context here. This work was done in the framework of the ICA-EU Partnership, and that is a political partnership we have with the European Commission, the ICA. And the idea is to raise the profile of cooperatives as actors in international development. So it's been running since 2016, and it's just concluded this month. So really the aim of that was to increase the recognition of co-ops in development policies and programs through a number of different activities. So this includes policy, includes advocacy, but also some dedicated research work that we have been doing. And it's involved all 4 ICA regions. So we've conducted this research in a horizontal and in a decentralized way. So what we're presenting to you today is based upon the efforts of all 4 ICA regional offices, and we've worked together on this report. And I just want to let, for those who may not know, we have some dedicated research activities. One is a mapping of cooperative actors, which is statistical work. A second is our legal frameworks analysis research, which is an analysis of co-op law. And thirdly, we have thematic research on cooperatives, and that covers several different themes of relevance for co-ops in international development. So we have publications, for example, on the contribution of cooperatives to peace building, to ICT, and other different topics in international co-op development. So the research there falls into the third category. So really, what have we done here? So we put this report together. It contains 8 case studies, 2 per ICA region. And at this stage, I think it's important to say that it's only really just a snapshot of what is out there. So definitely more research will be needed in the future. We had a common data template to collect these case studies, and we also held some semi-structured interviews with the cooperators or different stakeholders in some of the cases to gather more information to talk to us, and particularly having a bit of a focus on what is it about being a co-op, for example, what is the real cooperative difference here when it comes to the positive environmental outcomes in each of the cases. And so it's quite a short report. It's structured into 3 sections. We have an introduction where we try to give a bit of an overview of the topic as a whole, the different ways in which co-ops can contribute, and some of the theory and also the political, the policy frameworks. And then we have the case studies, and then a few conclusions. So it's a short overview, but it's an innovative overview. And I think, you know, when we think about the purpose of what we were doing, you know, it's clear for us, as you've mentioned, Erin, that environment and climate is really a key political priority. That's true for donors, but it's high on the agenda also for all of the ICA offices and our members. So that ever-growing interest goes hand in hand with the kind of ever-growing urgency I think we have when we look at climate and environment. So, you know, not looking at this topic risks kind of being left behind as the world is moving quite quickly now to tackle the threats of climate change. So really, this is just a kind of first conversation that we're opening here on that topic, but I think it's an interesting one and an important one to be had. And what we kind of looked at as we were doing it, I mean, there's already a lot of thinking that's been done already on why co-ops are conceptually well suited to climate and environment. And I just want to touch on a few of those areas here. And, you know, overall, we have some echoes of the potential for co-ops in the cooperative values. So, for example, values of solidarity and social responsibility, but also the cooperative principles, particularly Principle 7 on concern for community. But what I would say is that the extent to which the environmental commitment of co-ops is truly explicitly protected within the co-op identity is something which is perhaps open to interpretation and to question, and something that we should definitely be discussing. But there's been a lot of kind of empirical and theoretical work that has already kind of demonstrated the potential of the co-op, and a few interesting areas are here. I mean, perhaps the oldest and maybe the most famous is Elinor Ostrom's design principles. So these were kind of 8 rules for commons management that challenged this idea of the tragedy of the commons, you know, that the commons were sort of destined to be exploited or overused, and that showed also through the use of the cooperative that the collective management of natural resources can work in the right setting and the right context. A second is donut economics. So some of you may be familiar with this work. It's by an economist called Kate Rayworth, and this has a kind of a donut model of an inner and outer circle to accommodate planetary boundaries and put a sort of ecological ceiling of activities so that they're taking place in a kind of a safe zone of operation. And there are some principles involved in that approach as well, such as sort of distribution by design. So that's sort of one area that kind of came out, which is very interesting. And then thirdly, we have degrowth or post-growth, which sort of introduces the idea of kind of social and ecological well-being should be really replacing the kind of pursuit of growth for growth's sake, which is kind of the current economic model that we have with GDP so forth. So co-ops here are kind of a tool for economic localization, to keep the money in the community, and purposeful pursuit of the needs of people rather than something, you know, arbitrary such as profit or growth. And fourthly, we kind of have this idea of economic democracy coming forward. So what role should democracy play in the economy, you know, as democratic business enterprises? Does that help to kind of overcome this exploitation that we find in capitalist relations? Does it also really ensure that we take better care of the environment? So, for example, if we have collective responsibility, will that help to address some of the negative social or environmental externalities that are occurring in kind of traditional business operations? So these are all questions which I think are useful for further exploration when we looked at it. And then also as practitioners, I mean, we're also quite interested in the sphere of policy as well. So the ICA's role is kind of advocating for the role of co-ops as a key actor in the ecological transition. So the report tries to show this. It tries to show the variety of ways in which co-ops can and they are contributing. But also sort of a key question here is how can we do a little bit more? And at the different levels, we kind of see a lot of activity going on. So, you know, kind of at the local level, a very good example here is the rise in popularity of sort of energy communities, renewable energy cooperatives, and economic localization specifically. And some of you may be familiar with the Preston model, which kind of looks at the idea of public procurement. How can we keep the benefits of economic activity within the community? How can we keep this economic activity kind of anchored to the territory? And certain legislations at local level might promote the use of cooperatives here as a good model. Secondly, at the regional level, you know, for example, at European level, we have kind of flagship legislation such as the Green New Deal. Whereas if you look at a sector such as agriculture, co-ops are definitely a good way in which we can work towards more sustainable production and consumption, can improve kind of transparency in the value chain. So we sort of look at how co-ops can be included there at the regional level when we have these large legislative programs, and also the relative kind of opportunities that are attached to that. And thirdly, we have the international level. So here it's kind of about recognition of the co-op again, particularly by the United Nations and the UN bodies. Mainly in the context of sustainable development. So a good example here is that we've had a recent UN Secretary General's report on cooperatives and social development. And here co-ops are kind of recognised as a good actor for socially and environmentally just recovery, especially in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, of course. And finally, and I think a key theme for us when we were working on the report is the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030. So it's a key framework for us and our work. Some of the SDGs that are featured in the case studies in the report you can see on the right-hand side of the slide there. So some cooperatives are already using the SDGs as a framework, and you know, a lot of work is also going into how to measure the cooperative impact vis-a-vis the SDGs. So that's great, and I think it's a really great place to start for co-ops who may be looking, you know, to become more sustainable in their processes. I think the SDGs do have some difficulties and some problems. I mean, if we look at some certain ones, you know, sort of SDG economic growth or SDG 9 on innovation infrastructure, they're not sort of radically transforming the system in any kind of structural way, but it does, as I say, it does provide a good starting point for going forward from here. So going forward on that, I mean, before we sort of get to the case studies, and I kind of want to put forth some things maybe for discussion, just thinking about what sort of issues have been raised and touched on while we've been working on this research. I mean, the first of these is kind of the idea of the co-op identity in the environment. And I kind of mentioned that earlier, and it's to what extent are the values and the principles really adequate for a reality of an Earth that is effectively, you know, sort of it's on fire now. I mean, everyone has mentioned in the poll that they see the changes that are happening. So we maybe that's one place to start. A second is kind of the idea of what the reality is for many co-ops. with their work on the environment. I mean, I think it's fair to say that some are not reflective of the role that has been sketched out here and the role that has been sketched out in the report. But our role with this research was to kind of provide some great examples and to highlight the different ways in which Co-op are already doing great things. But I think it's important to strike that note. You know, we mustn't sort of romanticize the role that they play, and we have to ask, kind of, for those who are not as active, what might be the ways in which the environmental management can be improved, and how to kind of square the environmental and social demands with the economic, when you kind of, I mean, something you hear often from cooperative leaders is the need to remain competitive with other enterprise models. So we have to think about how these things can be balanced. So our conclusion does sketch a few of the things that might be required, you know, whether that's sort of better environmental self-assessment, SDG monitoring and indicators, or getting more young people involved in co-ops who you know, the ones who are most impacted by the climate threats of the future. Also looking at how to form partnerships with social and environmental movements, you know, better international framework for cooperation, or just even better research and data on co-ops themselves. So all of this stuff, I think, will be quite important. Thirdly, this kind of idea of size and scale and the sector of an enterprise, and that has a big impact on what the best route will be to being more sustainable. So, you know, there's not a one size fits all, there's not a real template. You know, what works for something, a small cooperative, will not be perhaps suitable for a multi-million dollar turnover for, you know, an enterprise of a large size. So we have to look at that. And then finally, this idea of kind of other enterprise models, and where do cooperatives sort of place themselves in this question of climate and environment, because we have the rise of sort of social solidarity economy, we have the rise of also corporate social responsibility on the other hand, and ESG, and so very much I think it's important to come forth and to talk about this issue, because it's moving so quickly that the kind of climate legacy of co-ops, if you like, is sort of hanging in the balance. So these are some of the questions that I think have come forth from that research, and I think it would be really interesting to hear also from people here some of their experiences of your own cooperatives, or cooperatives that you know, or cooperatives you're involved in. Also good examples of this, so perhaps we can look at that in the discussion. So that's a kind of brief overview, and I'd like to pass the floor to my colleague Simren to look at some of the case studies that are in the report. So thank you.
We'll now present the case studies from various ICA regions. To start with, the next slide, please. The first case that we would like to present is from Asia. It's on Association of Asian Confederation of Credit Unions. It's a regional organization for credit unions in the Asia region. ACU, as we call it, it's an ICA member, and what it has done is that as a response to COVID-19, it came up with a business solution guide for its members. And one of the things that it introduced in its solution guides was the business solution guide for credit unions on climate action. And the guide on climate action was prepared in the belief that institutionalizing climate actions and educating members on climate risks and making them assess their vulnerability is essential to prepare them for climate action. So the guide to climate action that they prepared has 6 components, which they call as game changers. One of the foremost things that they did was they introduced the 6C of credit. So in simple terms, when credit unions give credit to their members or non-members, they have introduced a 6C of credit, which is climate, and they assess the climate responsiveness, climate readiness of the loan that is being taken by members. The second component of the guide to climate action is do-it-yourself energy audit. So they have a guide that helps members to do their own energy audits. Third component was self-assessment for waste audit. Fourth was waste audit and management of the business. Fifth, green finance principle in lending. And sixth, integrated climate actions in ACU business solutions wherever applicable. Not only this, ACU has also launched an Sdg Contribution Monitor for its credit union members. It encourages its members to report on the achievements on 8 priority SDGs that are determined mutually by ACU and its members. And among the priority goals that have been set by them are SDG 6, which is clean water and sanitation, and SDG 7, which is affordable and clean energy. During our research on ACU and its climate action initiatives, we also found out that ACU is also partnering with other cooperatives in the Philippines for training of trainers. So what essentially they have done is they have partnered with Philippine Federation of Credit Cooperatives and National Confederation of Cooperatives, which is also an ICA member in the Philippines, to conduct training of trainers on climate action. And after these trainings, the staff and cooperative leaders who were trained are now called climate warriors, who are working with their own credit unions to build a substantial number of advocates for climate action. So through this, what ACU is essentially trying to do is ingrain or inculcate the awareness and education of climate change and climate action among its members, and also stimulating an environmentally responsible behavior by introducing the 6th C of credit. Our next case study, next slide, please. Our next case study is from Finland, which is from a cooperative called the Metsä Group, Metsälito Cooperative, which is the parent company of Metsä Group. Some of you might have heard about this cooperative. It's essentially a forest cooperative, which works on the principles of commons. Again, some of you might be familiar with the ideology of commons. The bylaws of Metsälito Cooperative states that the purpose of this cooperative is to support its members' forest management and organize the marketing of wood produced by its members in an economical and technologically efficient manner, seeking profit in accordance with the principles of sustainability. They have roughly about 100,000 members who are forest owners, and they collectively own about 50% of all privately owned forests in Finland. They have about 900 employees, and the Metsä Group operates in 30 countries worldwide. Their business model essentially depends on forest growth, which promotes the use of forests as sinks for carbon dioxide while providing renewable raw material for various byproducts. So what essentially they do is their business model is dependent on forest products, which they convert into either usable products, or they make it into byproducts, which are sold through Metsä Group, but ensuring that the resources of forests are not depleted or are not drained out. In 2019, the Metsä Group renewed its long-term sustainability objectives, and by 2030, it seeks to achieve. One of the goals that they have set for themselves is that by 2030, the group aims to have eliminated the use of fossil fuels at its mills site. So essentially, right now, 90% of fuels used to power the group's mills are currently based on side streams for its own production. And by 2030, in about 9 years' time, they want to eliminate the use of fossil fuels, which are currently being used at their mills. We have a video to present to you here, which will explain the model of Metsä Cooperative in a nuanced manner. Jeffrey, may I request you to please play the video? I think we are facing some technical issues here. Yeah.
Minä olen Piskosen Antti Metsägroupilta ja toimin metsäasiantuntijana Puumala-Anttola-alueena. Ja lähdetäänpäs pienelle metsäkierrokselle katsomaan, millä tavalla täällä otetaan luonto huomioon eri toimenpiteissä. Metsä pitää aina uudistaa hakkuun jälkeen. Lakikin sen jo vaatii. Taimi aina valitaan kasvupaikalle sopiva puulaji. Ei mietitä tiettyjä suhdanteita eikä bisnestä. Rehevämmät paikat uudistetaan kuuselle ja koivulle. Ja tuolla karummilla rinteillä sitten käytetään puulajina mäntyä. Tämä taimikko on uudistettu 8-9 vuotta taaksepäin. Kuviolle on tehty maanmuokkaus kääntymätäistystä apuna käyttäen. Ja kuusi on istutettu sitten kääntymättään päälle. Seuraavana toimenpiteenä sitten muutaman vuoden päästä tähän tehdään taimikon harvennus, missä kuusikko harvennetaan lopulliseen kasvutiheyteen odottamaan ensiharvennusta. Tässä on tehty harvennushakkuu viime syksynä. Yleensä otetaan noin 1/3 puustosta, että saadaan jäljelle jääville puille sitten hyvä kasvutila. Ja tänne on jätetty mukavasti sekapuuta, männikö sekaa, turvaa sitten lajiston monimuotoisuutta. Tässähän meillä löytyykin sitten esimerkki tekopökkelöstä. Näitä tekopökkelöitä jätetään harvennushakkulla ja päätehakkulla 2-4 kappaletta hehtaarille. Siitä saa sitten tiaiset ja kolopesijät hyviä pesätarpeita ja aikanaan kun se kaatuu ja maatuu, niin siinä on sitten monelle lahopuustoa käyttävälle lajistolle oivallista elinympäristöä. Säästöpuita jätetään 10-12 kappaletta hehtaarille vähintään. Ja ne pyritään jättämään tälleen ryhmiin niin kuin tässä oivallisesti rajatussa säästöpuuryhmässä. Lahopuut on myös erittäin tärkeä osa säästöpuuryhmiä. Tällä 10 vuotta takaperin uudistetulla taimikkoalueella on otettu sertifiointikriteerit varsin hyvin huomioon. Tässä uudistusalan ja vesistön väli on jätetty tuollainen reilu 10 metriä leveä suojavyöhyke, joka koostuu erilaisista puulajeista. Tätä uudistusalaa ei juuri tuolta vedeltä katsottuna näe ollenkaan. Hoidetaan metsiä hyvin ja tehdään toimenpiteet fiksusti ja nautitaan yhdessä metsistä, että kaikki kulkee käsi kädessä ja yhteispelillä hyvää tulee.
So this was a video on Metsa Group. We'll now move forward to another case study, which my colleague Melvin will present. I request Melvin to please jump in.
Yes, thank you very much, Simren. So our next case study, next slide, please, Jeff. Sorry, the Satel.
Is it Satel? No?
Yes, Satel.
Hold on. Sorry, Melvin.
No, that's fine. I'm personally excited about this case study simply because it's on energy. I feel like we're in 2021 and with all our ambitions on going to the moon, Mars, or wherever planet we're thinking, we're still struggling for access to electricity. At some point, it was estimated that over 1 billion people don't have access to electricity. I think there was a slight reduction in 2019 where this was a little over 750 million, but that's still a lot, as you would agree. So I'm excited to see a cooperative getting involved in this space. So Satel Cooperative is in Brazil. Basically, they're trying to meet the energy needs of their community. Satel is the oldest energy cooperative, which was formed in 1956. I won't really go into the full details as you could get the full information from the report. But our main highlight from this case study was how they stepped into the need of providing energy for their local community. And as you could see from the results, so as of now, they've successfully electrified 48 municipalities. And what's also impressive about this also is the amount of people that they've been able to target doing this. You could see it's 3,000 people, which is good, because most times what happens, especially in rural areas, companies that are more focused for profit, and even the government sometimes would not get into areas where they feel like they can't invest in all the infrastructure to get electricity. So it's a good, just from our principles as cooperatives, are concerned for community, that a cooperative can spot a need and get involved in trying to provide solutions. And also targeting the SDGs Jeff mentioned earlier. So with SATEL, they have specific programs targeted, for example, SDG 7, where they try to provide affordable and clean energy. What SATEL do, they focus on generating electricity from renewable sources, such as, I'm not the expert, I want to go into all the methods they use, but for example, something like photovoltaic. I think this is something like you just try to generate electricity from light. Another examples from the wind and hydroelectricity. SATEL also tried to get involved into reforestation projects, and also they're really proud about installing and trying to recover some of the permanent preservation areas. This also will help with in terms of sustainability, and on SDG 13 and climate action as well. So I think we can go on to the next case study, Jeff. This one is also close at home for me personally, as this is a housing cooperative in Tanzania. With this cooperative, they try to provide affordable housing to their members using innovative environmental mechanisms. In a nutshell, what they try to do is, in areas where most times a lot of deforestation goes on in terms of getting the materials to build houses, BOCOSA targets preventing a lot of deforestation and improving the energy efficiency. So what they do is they use a material that was previously referred to just as a waste in the process of making the bricks. If you get into the report, you'll get more information on how the ilk is done. But I felt that was innovative in even saving the trees, and also even with the degradation, helps to save degradation in terms of not using as much fire as previously done. They're also proud in the fact that they've added value in what was usually considered as a waste, which I mentioned earlier. So in effect, this helps improve their efficiency and eliminating issues of deforestation and degradation as mentioned. But I'd also like to highlight the importance in terms of, for both cooperatives, and I'm sure even with the previous case study mentioned by Simren, that's also, it's important that cooperatives also find it very important to train their members on these energy environmental friendly mechanisms. So they are all, like, the awareness in this on climate action is a priority for most cooperatives, which we encourage other cooperatives to copy these best practices. So in effect, there are more case studies on the report. So we just wanted to highlight these 4, and we are open for the panel from our colleagues from the audience to throw in their questions or maybe share more examples. And as Jeffrey mentioned, these are not exhaustive, but these were some of the best practices we got from the various 4 ICA regions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you for bringing those case studies to life. And also, Jeffrey, for all of the context at the beginning. I think that's really helpful to ground the whole way of seeing these issues. So this is a time for everyone to shine. It's a time for you to ask any clarifying questions. I know, Hanan, something came up in the chat from you. And also I wanted to invite other folks, if you have examples lingering, either cooperatives that you're directly involved with, or also cooperatives that you know about that you think are worth highlighting. Because, you know, it is important that we have critical conversations about this. It's important, as Jeffrey said, that we not romanticize sort of the cooperative systems approach on a whole to responding to climate change, that we want to celebrate what's working and amplify what's working and hopefully implement more across the board. But also be clear that, you know, being a co-op doesn't just ensure that you are doing all of the right things and being a good ethical citizen. So I think it's good to have those critical conversations, but also to share what's working. So, and there's a hand up too, but I do want to just quickly run a poll, our second poll, and Hanan's going to run that for us. Sort of with the question of do you see cooperatives leading or lagging in terms of those cooperatives that you're aware of and you're involved with? So Hanan will post that poll now. So Hanan, jump in when we get the majority of responses in.
%60.
60% say that they see co-ops leading.
Oh, that have participated so far. I'm
have participated. Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
there are a handful of stragglers, so I'll give them a few more moments.
Okay. It's the fun idiosyncrasies of Zoom.
So I think we have this critical mass with of participants, you know, of everyone here. We've got 86 who have taken the poll. 28% of you think, yes, I can think of some great examples. 34 see a real mix. 34 say no. The majority of the co-ops I know are not leading in the ecological transition to a green economy. And then we just have one person at 3% responding with no. I think co-ops are way behind in this regard. So rather mixed, I would say. I'm going to end the poll and try to share the results so you can see it. Let's see. You should be able to see it on the screen. Do you see that? There.
Thank you, Hanan. Okay, well, that's helpful to know. And I think that that's fair based on certainly what conversations I've been involved with too, saying, you know, there are folks like those showcased today that are really leading, and even the whole ethos, the whole, you know, reason for being for their particular cooperative is to address issues arising, you know, in the environment and in response to climate change. But some, it's considered an add-on once you take care of the economic. There's a real spectrum in which folks are oriented to this and what they prioritize and, you know, what needs to come first and so forth. And, you know, we're always a big proponent that you never want to sort of say economic or social or environmental. We never want to pit these things against each other or say one should show up and be more important at the front of the priorities list than others. But obviously, you know, people have demands, they have regulations, they've got, you know, member concerns and so forth that are tugging on these various ends. So we acknowledge that too, but I want to get to some of the questions. So I think Ali Reza, you had your hand up. Did you want to contribute, ask a question or make a comment? And introduce yourself too, please, so everyone knows who you are.
This is Ali Reza. I'm from Iran, and I'm working as the International Affairs Manager of Iran Chamber of Cooperatives, which is the apex body for the cooperative movement in Iran. Well, it was very, very good and informative webinar. I really liked the case study that was mentioned along with the main report, and specifically the case study from Finland. I guess it was very interesting for me. But I was actually going to ask about the final comment that Erin mentioned about the different aspects of the cooperatives in different countries. Well, mainly we divide the cooperatives into different subcategories of social aspect and economic aspect. Mainly in my country, at least, the economic aspect is much more dominant, and less cooperatives are working to activate and to promote the social aspect of the cooperatives. Although the main reason behind all the cooperatives, well, globally, and specifically in this new world, cooperatives are trying to highlight the social aspect of the cooperatives. Well, we take social and environmental into one big aspect. So I was actually going to ask what cooperatives can do to highlight about the need to pay more attention to the social aspect. This is more in a top-down strategy, saying that the governments should also pay different attentions and also different priorities to the cooperatives who are going towards the social aspect. Like, for example, there are cooperatives who are trying to help the poor people from different regions of different cities, or trying to create some jobs, or for example, there are actually cooperatives in Iran. There is one single cooperative who is hiring everyone who has been in prison before. So this is, so usually companies and cooperatives, they look for some people who have not been to the prison, but this one is looking for someone who has been into prison, just to give them the idea that, well, they're alive and you can go ahead. And specifically, I was going to ask, what is the way that we can increase the attention of the cooperatives towards the social aspect rather than the economy? Well, of course, economy is important, but...
Thank you, Alireza. And thanks for the context too. I think it's interesting for folks to hear a bit more about what's happening in your part of the world as well. Do any of our speakers want to respond to that? And then I know there are probably a few people in the participant group today who might want to respond as well. Others can feel free to show your video now too. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'd be happy to hear from Simran or Melvin, and definitely the audience on what they thought. I mean, one thing I wanted to say in the context of this is also interesting in terms of when we were talking with these cooperators for some of the case studies. It was a kind of a cumulative or expansive sort of approach in terms of incorporating kind of both an environmental aspect, but then also a social aspect to the activities. So some of the co-ops kind of started out doing one thing and then decided, oh no, okay, let's expand that and let's bring in something a little bit different, even if it wasn't kind of environmentally related. So I mean, in the case of Sertel, they started with the energy provision, but then they decided to get into conservation and to take up the land and then expand into conservation. A second example is we didn't present it today, but it's in the report, Touton Vélo, which is a bicycle kind of franchise cooperative in France. And they kind of had this idea based on the environmental aspect. Then they were doing a lot of social work and social support for young or poor people in the communities in which they were living. They were doing some outreach work in terms of that. So it wasn't centered on the initial objective of protecting the environment, but then they kind of got involved in other things. So just a thought in terms of to what extent, you know, with the kind of reinvestment of the surplus in the enterprise that is dedicated to the co-op model, does that facilitate the possibility to then look at something else? Okay, what do we want to do next? Kind of thing. That's one thing that we saw.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Go ahead, Simran.
Yeah. To Alireza's question, I have two responses actually. The second one is very similar to what Jeffrey is saying when businesses diversify. They started off with something else, now they are like AKU. Alireza is very well versed with AKU. So they started off with credit unions, which we can say is economic and social. And now, you know, they're adding on the environmental part onto their feathers, and they're promoting environmental sustainability. But my main response to your question would be, Alireza, that co-ops essentially are started, they originate because they want to address people's needs, you know, and if the needs are social or environment, then they need not diversify. In the case of Finland, for instance, the needs, I think, were to protect the forest resources, and from there they started, you know, diversifying into byproducts and other products of, you know, selling the forest produce. We have another example from Australia where the needs were community based in modern terms of electricity. You know, people did not want coal-based electricity, and they wanted renewable energy, electricity sourced out of renewable energy, which was cheaper and very, available in their vicinity. So I think co-ops as a business model is very need-based. So if you want to say how should co-ops sort of promote their social or environmental aspects, it all depends on what needs they are addressing. You know, I think the start is there. That would be my response to you.
Do others have responses to this? I know I've met lots of people over the years who have different perspectives on the purpose of co-ops, and some of them can be quite narrow and direct, and others really internalize the externalities. They really keep in mind their impact. They really acknowledge and are responsible for the ways they are in the world, and consider those to be embedded in their business and crucial to their business, and that having economic success, you know, while exploiting workers isn't expressing the co-op model in the way it's intended, and so forth. So hopefully we're stirring things up for you all. Who else wants to comment on this? Louis and Tom, I see. Okay, Melvin next, and then maybe others who want to join in too. Go ahead, Melvin.
Probably what I can just add, not to repeat what my colleagues say, have mentioned, is probably that co-ops should also just be a bit more adaptable, because you could see even for some of other examples, you see like a financial cooperative, for example, being interested in financing renewable like energy activities. Even like for agricultural cooperatives, we see the more they become aware, they want to get into climate smart, adaptive practices. So that's what I would want to add, that the co-ops being adaptive.
Thank you, Melvin. Go ahead, Louis. Can I mute yourself? Go ahead.
Well, hello, Riza, and I'll start by saying I like your beard. I've got somebody at the door, so I'm going to have to get off. Sorry.
Oh, it's probably a golden comment. We do have some other folks who have typed some interesting things into the chat. If you all are following that, I'll go back earlier in the webinar. We had Hanan who had posted, and this I think will be our last question before I sort of give a bit of a conclusion, and then we can stay on for a few extra minutes for those who want to stay and chat too, but will respect those who need to leave. So the question was, are there examples of cooperatives that conceive of behaving in environmentally responsible ways in itself a way of staying competitive with other businesses or other business models? So see that as an advantage in the marketplace, if you will. Did anybody want to respond to that? Go ahead, Simran.
Yeah, there are plenty of them actually. They might be known for that instead of being environmentally inclined. But anyway, jokes apart, there are plenty of examples. For instance, IFFCO in India. Now, very recently, it's an Indian farmers fertilizer cooperative, and they have come up with nano urea, which is, I think, a unique product in the world. It's nano liquid urea, and they're competing with other urea or fertilizer organizations in the world. So they are in agriculture sector, farm sector, promoting pro-green practices as well, I'm saying, but they are also very much into the business and the competition part of it. So there are examples of that sort. Metso, the group that we showed here from Finland, is again one of the examples.
Thank you, Simran. If others have additional things to add to that, you can add it to the chat now too. So I just wanted to honor us by wrapping up within the hour and letting you know what else there is to sort of participate in and take advantage and stay connected in the future. And that is that we're as active as we can be, mostly on Facebook, but other platforms as well, letting people know about events happening within the co-op sector, publications, case studies, interesting things coming up, not just stuff happening within our center. So you can check us out at Co-op Management, COOP-MGMT on those channels. We also have short courses. We have one coming up later this week. Registration is closed, but if you're very keen, we might make space for you. We have online part-time management education for cooperatives, a certificate, graduate diploma, and master's program online part-time for working professionals in the co-op sector globally. And also we have a Cooperative Management Education Cooperative, which is a group of motivated and interested folks globally who participate in supporting our education, keeping it current, funding scholarships, supporting to ensure that we always make sure that there's enterprise education that is custom for the co-op model. So lots of smart and interesting people involved with that as well. So if you're interested in any of these things, reach out to me, but I will highlight some opportunities for you currently. And that is that we had a governance symposium for cooperatives, a global symposium online back in June. And now we've posted all of those recordings to our YouTube channel. I'll include that in the chat in just a moment. We also have a report coming out this week summarizing key things coming out of that symposium. So really interesting stuff happening. And also, I just wanted to showcase that we will have some more webinars coming up in the new year. We try to do them at least a couple of times per spring and fall here in Canada. And also would like to invite anybody who has some research ongoing or some interesting case studies or some topics you'd really like to see someone address. Name that to me in the chat right now so we can make sure that we, in fact, do give you what you want and have you participate. So I'll thank all of you and invite you to stay on if you want to chat a little bit more. I see some more chats are coming in now. So I'll close it for anybody who needs to leave. And thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you hugely to our speakers on the heels of doing all of that research and getting a report together to be able to make the time to share it all with us. We very much appreciate that. And for everyone here today, we will send you an email by tomorrow with a link to the recording as well as the report. So thank you, everyone, for those who need to leave and for anybody who wants to stay. And if you want to unmute yourself, make a comment, offer an example, please do so.
Thank you so much, Erin. I myself, I do have to run off, but I encourage the discussion to continue.
Sounds great. Thank you very much, Jeffrey. Did anybody want to have a closing comment or anything that's top of mind for you right now? Go ahead, Louis.
Well, I'm back. The issue that Ali Reza, sorry if I mispronounce it, was bringing up is how co-ops can be interested in social efforts. The thing is that we know that many co-ops will go very silo type. They'll stay in their field and all that and just not look at anything. There's another aspect that's called cooperatives, cooperation among cooperatives, which allow not only the same type of cooperatives to work together, but different types of cooperatives to be able to make a community better. I had an example of that. Unfortunately, it was about 20 years ago. I'll give a quick example. About 20 years ago, a cooperative was formed to create housing co-ops. But what they did, it wasn't a housing co-op, it was a co-op formed to build housing co-ops. It was in Saskatchewan. And what they did is they found people who didn't have housing and needed housing, who most of them were on social assistance. They found homes that were somewhat derelict, helped them rebuild those homes, worked with them, rebuilt the homes with the people participating. They brought it up to code. They did a lot of different things, and they were charging the rental from social welfare. At the end of a certain number of years, they transformed part of that into a down payment for their house, so that the people could actually own the house.
Oh.
Unfortunately, the government changed and they no longer allowed that. But that again shows that there's a need to be able to be within the community, working with governments and all that to ensure something. But there's different types of housing co-ops, co-housing, which basically the people own and share, or rental housing. Anyway, sorry for the long thing, but it's a way to be able to reach into the community, people that come together to do something to help the community.
Absolutely. And there's certainly a lot of champions who see that movement building role as being part of what they do. So not just focusing in on their direct membership and that sort of transaction, but also seeing themselves as being part of this cooperative economy or even the co-op value chain. And, mentioning Principle 6 and cooperation among co-ops is absolutely critical to our DNA, and certainly also a business advantage in terms of building ethical supply chains that are also democratically run and governed by the folks who are involved. So, we see that, in our friends who work in coffee and chocolate distribution, who will specifically work with and have ethical relationships with folks who are at the base of the value chain, working in farmer cooperatives. In lots of places in the developing world. So yes, lots of good examples of that. It actually reminded me of a case study that one of our graduates from our master's program, or a paper rather, I'll put it in the chat right now, Adam Trott, wrote about Principle 6, being expressed in associations and federations, and how those sort of second and third tier organizations play such a critical role in movement building for cooperatives. So I've linked that there for anybody who's interested. Okay, I know a lot more has come in the chat. I was listening to Louie and I didn't catch all of it. So, okay, Camilla, oh, thank you for being here. Great. This is a complex idea, but in short, environmental responsibility generally comes at a cost, many times significant for co-ops, unless they're big like IFCO. Many times are hard to implement. Co-op sectors must support environmental legislation for all businesses so that co-ops can compete and be true to their values and principles. Thank you for that, Camilla. Great. Great. Did anybody else want to say anything before we end the conversation today? Lots of good stuff in the chat. Someone has requested, are we going to get these chat notes? I think I've enabled for people to be able to save the chat themselves, but I'll go ahead and save it, and I will share that by tomorrow along with the recording and the report. Okay, thanks to everyone. I appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. Keep doing the good work. Thank you, Simren. Thank you to our speakers. Keep doing the good work. Keep having the critical conversations. Our work is never done, but my goodness, it's meaningful work, isn't it? Thank you. Take care.
Thanks,
Thank
Louis.
you, Erin.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Ali Reza. Nice to see you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Melvin.